Would you like to become a better coin collector, a better numismatist, and increase the value of your coin collection in the process? I've been collecting ancient coins for a good decade now, and I've noticed these 5 habits that I picked up helped me understand my coins quicker, better, enjoy this hobby more, and they've had the added benefit of increasing the value of my collection. May it be because I ended up purchasing better coins, or I've managed to actually add value to the pieces that I already own. So today I'm going to share these tips with you. You see, the way ancient coin collecting works right now, especially the market, when you take into account like the auction environment and your average retail dealer, the way coins are presented and sold is very similar to how modern coins are sold. However, these are very different objects, despite both modern and ancient coins being both, well, coins, and certain elements like the fact we grade these for their state of conservation, the way we describe them, it's kind of similar. That's where the similarities kinda end, and there's a lot more to it. Therefore, I personally feel like there's a disconnect between the way ancient coins are presented to the public and what the specific kind of collector who buys ancient coins actually wants from the experience. And I would argue we should engage in this hobby and navigate the ancient coin market much more like how collectors of antiquities do it. And even if the market doesn't want to change, after all, I'm just another collector rambling on the internet, still, I invite you to just have a chat with any fellow ancients collector at like a coin show. Ask them what they enjoy about collecting, what gives a coin value to them, and compare it against these 5 tips. And you'll get what I mean. It's all about enriching the experience of owning these objects, filling them with meaning, and communicating this meaning in a way that shows people how valuable these things truly are. So, the first tip would be to stop looking at a coin simply as an object, as like a collectible, and more as an experience. And this is applicable to a group of coins, like to a set, but also for an individual piece. What gives a coin its depth? It's not only that it is old and that it miraculously survived to our days, but that it allows you to form a connection to the world that produced it, a world that doesn't exist anymore. Who made it, when it was made, what it was meant to say, what hands it may have passed through. All of that becomes part of the object and you need to communicate it. Once you start seeing coins that way, but especially letting people understand what is special about your particular coin, you are curating an experience of contact with the past, I would say. And honestly, I think the antiquities market often understands this better than the numismatic market. Imagine, for example, someone buys a Viking sword and puts it on display at home. Nobody looks at that sword as just a commodity with a price tag attached. The auction house will tell a story about it, a story custom made to entice you to buy it, and the buyer will tell a different story about it once it's at display in their home, maybe to justify its value, but also to explain their connection to this object. Why this piece matters, what it represents, what kind of person may have carried it, what period of history it belongs to, why it deserves a place in a collection, either their collection or your collection, so you assess value. Its value comes not only from rarity or condition, these matter, but from the experience it offers. It becomes a way of engaging with a historical moment, and it becomes this engine of engaging the imagination of each person who handles this object, and, well, a link to the past. And ancient coins, of course, they can, given you put in the work to curate this experience, they can provide the same intense experience. Every detail has a reason to be there. When you look at a coin, everything has a reason to be there. The weight of a coin connects it to, I don't know, like a monetary tradition. The images chosen to the obverse and reverse, they're not random. They communicate the cultural identity of the people who made the coin. And it's all about turning this commoditized object, this coin, this commodity, which is, it's sad to think about these objects as commodities, to transform them into something far more personal and far more specific. And when you keep that information, the research you made to make this like this personal experience, when you present it with the coin, you transform this object. It is no longer just an ancient collectible. It becomes like a real unique experience of connection between the object, the viewer, and the past. Now, of course, this is not an easy task. This requires a fair bit of research, but I would guess that's one of the reasons why you chose to engage in such intellectually intensive hobby. Not only curating this experience adds value to the coin, but in the process of adding this value to the coin, you're making yourself a better numismatist. Because if you want to present this piece in this way, you actually have to learn about numismatics. You have to understand the type, the civilization, the history, the monetary system. You have to look at catalogs. You have to describe iconography. I mean, in other words, you have to do the work of turning the coin into a story that can be explained to someone else. You know, they say one of the best ways to learn something is when you're tasked with teaching to other people what you yourself are trying to learn. So yeah, tip number 1 is to transform every coin you have into an experience. And once you start doing that, once you start learning a coin well enough to turn it into a story, something else begins to happen, which leads me to my second tip, which I call establishing aesthetic judgment. We don't want to be knowledgeable just in this narrow, like numismatic sense, but we want to develop a personal taste. And that matters because sooner or later, every collector runs into the same problem. Optimally, you only want to spend your money on exceptional pieces, but at the beginning, you do not really know what exceptional means. I'm going to illustrate this with an example. So imagine I put 5 Alexander the Great drachmas in front of you. Same denomination, same basic type, and let us say they're all in roughly the same state of preservation. Then I tell you the price is $300, and for that money you can choose just one of these coins. Now on the surface this sounds simple enough, but in reality that $300 could be getting you a bargain, the bargain of the year, or it could be a complete waste of money. And if you're new, you may not yet know why. Because the difference is not only in grade. One coin may come from a very rare mint, another from an extremely common one. One may have been struck in a place with real historical weight. In Alexander's story, for example, somewhere like Babylon or Egypt, while another one may come from a much less significant mint. One may have a strong, elegant portrait that you need to learn how to identify, or like a beautiful reverse, while another one may be like a flat, lifeless, mediocre in style. And all of these things matter. And all of these things have, of course, very real monetary value. And here's the important part. You do not learn this only by staring at auction listings all day or memorizing the catalog of Alexander coins. Although these certainly help. You learn it by getting closer to the world that produced the coin. You learn it by studying the history, the culture, and especially the art of the people who made it. Because once you begin to understand the artistic language of a period, once you get a feel for that culture, what that culture valued visually, you start seeing the difference between a merely acceptable coin and something that is truly special. Of course, this is applicable to any kind of coin, not just Alexander's. That applies to anything that was pretty much, that the die was handmade. I mean, Greek, Romans, Byzantines, medievals, it's all the same in principle. The more you understand the cultural and artistic world behind the coin you collect, the more depth you add to the whole experience. It's like those people who roast Byzantine coins saying they're ugly. I mean, it's your personal taste, that is fine, but you're missing the point. The Eastern Romans did not, after the fall of Rome, they didn't lose like 30 IQ points and all of a sudden lost the ability to make pretty things. There is a reason to everything. including the crudeness of the coins. And this is part of the experience. Can you, for example, spot the remarkable coins amongst these so-called crude Byzantine coins? Guess what? If you learn about it and you can spot the special coins there, there's money to be had. Not only in buying an exceptional coin for an average price, but actually educating the audience on why it is special. Alright, so as you can see, the first couple of tips I gave you, you turn the coin into, first into a journey into the past, but now you're doing something slightly different. You're also turning it into an encounter with another civilization's idea of beauty. What did these people what did they think was worth showing? What kinds of faces, bodies, symbols did they find pleasing, powerful, noble looking? And then inevitably that raises another question. What do you find beautiful and why do you find it beautiful? That's a super cool question to ask yourself, because that's where collecting becomes really special, interesting, and sort of personal, because now there's a kind of dialogue between your own taste and theirs from the past. You begin to notice what you share with the ancient world and what you do not. You begin to ask whether your own sense of beauty may in part descend from artistic choices made centuries or even millennia ago. So this is not only about buying better coins, although that certainly helps, but it's also about refining your eye. It's like sharpening your judgment, enriching your own sense of aesthetics. And in the process, the numismatic experience when presenting one of your coins becomes even deeper. Your collection becomes even more valuable because it has levels of depth, of consideration that other people, other dealers, whatever, wouldn't have. And since I've mentioned your collection becoming more valuable and deeper, that leads to my third tip, which is depth is valuable. Let me present to you another hypothetical situation. Let's say I invite you to 2 auctions. I tell you there are 2 auctions happening this weekend, but you can only attend one. Which auction would you rather attend? One simply described as a diverse selection of ancient coins, or one presented as the collection of a gentleman, assembled over 3 decades of careful research. Even if the coins in both sales are broadly similar in quality, let's assume this, most collectors would probably be drawn to the second one. And I think that tells us something important. We're not only attracted to objects, we are attracted to thought, to purpose. A collection that was built slowly, with patience and judgment, it feels different from just a group of coins gathered more or less at random. It has coherence, it has a personality, and that kind of depth has real value in the numismatic world. Going into a bit of a philosophical tangent here, I think this is true in all areas of life. We tend to admire things that are well thought out, things made with effort and intention. Like a well-designed garden, think about this, like a beautiful furnished room, anything made with thought, you name it. These things are satisfying because they reflect choices. They show that someone was not merely accumulating, they were shaping, they were intentional. And in numismatics, that difference matters enormously. Like, yes, a tray full of mint state coins can be impressive and it can fetch a high price, but simple accumulation by itself, it's never quite enough. A collection becomes something greater when there's, apart from a good eye for quality, there's intelligence behind it. And our forefathers knew about this. Aristotle argued that excellence in intellectual matters comes from the union of several different qualities. There's phronesis, which is practical judgment, the ability to make sound decisions. There's nous, which is intuitive understanding, like that quick grasp of the first principles of underlying truth. I would call street smarts, understanding the realities of the world. There's episteme, which is like more systematic knowledge, the kind of knowledge you build through study and learning. And there's techne, skill, technique, that's where the word comes from. This like trained capacity to actually do something well with your knowledge. When these are brought together, all of these qualities, they're brought together and refined, Aristotle said they contributed to what is the manifestation of Sophia, wisdom. And wisdom in the classical sense is not just knowing many things, it is bringing different mental skills and acting with understanding of what the hell you're doing. I feel this is like absolutely applicable to your collection, and it reflects in a collection that has value. Because I hope you have this experience when we encounter like a truly well curated collection. It's a thing to behold. I think we almost sense this instinctively. We can tell even before we fully explain why that this collection was assembled by someone who exercised judgment, like based on knowledge accumulated over years and lots of patience to get like the right objects for this collection. That is what gives certain collections majesty. Like not only beauty, not only rarity, not only like an MS star, 5 out of star on an NGC slab, but this show of wisdom in the assembly. I hope you're getting where I'm going here. Like we first established each coin as an experience, then we added depth to that experience, and now we're ensuring this experience is as rich and as meaningful as possible. We then go to tip number 4, which is that provenance has value. Because an ancient coin really has 2 lives. The first one was in antiquity, when it functioned as money and it passed from hand to hand, it picked up its wear from circulation, it took part in the economic life, it was money. But then it had this second life, the modern one, as a collectible. It was like unearthed, identified, cleaned, bought and sold, and eventually it went into your collection. And that second life matters a great deal because provenance, where this coin has been, it tells you like who owned the coin, where it appeared, which dealer handled it, and whether it can be traced to an old collection or even to like a recorded treasure. So the coin is no longer just an ancient object. It has like a modern history within numismatics. And this history brings real benefits. First, it adds trust. Even if you don't care very much who owned a coin 50 years ago, the fact that other collectors, that a dealer, an auction house handled this coin before you, it is already meaningful. Like in practical terms, a provenance works as kind of like an authentication by proxy. The coin has already been examined and considered authentic and collectible by others in this field before the coin reached your hands. It can also act as a quality filter because coins that have long paper trails, they're often coins that earlier collectors thought were worth preserving and recording in the first place, which implies quality. And beyond that, provenance connects a coin to the history of collecting itself. Sometimes a coin has appeared in like an old catalog, an auction archive, or even an important publication. And at that point, it is not just a coin from the ancient world, but it has a place in the modern intellectual history of numismatics. Guess what? That adds value. There's also the legal side, which is not especially romantic, but it is important. We live in a bit of a complicated world. We have export restrictions, new cultural property disputes, increased in scrutiny over ownership history, and provenance is one of the strongest protections a collector can have. Even something simple like keeping the invoice of your coin can help show that a coin was acquired in good faith from established sources and has been circulated like legitimately for years. It's sad that we need to consider the fact some bureaucrat might want to take a coin away from you and lock it away in a museum, but it's always good to be pragmatic and protect our claims. That kind of documentation can protect ownership. It reassures future buyers who won't necessarily trust your word, and they make a coin easier to sell when the time comes. And that is really the point. Provenance is not just an academic extra. It's not just like a nice story. It has very tangible value. It can make coins easier to trust, easier to sell, and this carries real monetary value. And by the way, before I go to number 5, you should consider subscribing to my newsletter, where I share weekly lots of tips on how to collect ancient coins. The link to it is in the video description and the tagged comment. It costs you nothing and it provides tons of value. So by all means, take a look. And remember also to like and subscribe to this video if I'm providing you with some value. Okay, back to it. And let's look at tip number 5, which is to make a name for yourself. This tip ties up with tips 3 and 4 quite a lot. In a community as small as ours, after all, ancient coins is a small niche, we have the tendency of enjoying things that are thoughtful, as I mentioned in the previous one, and a collection becomes more appealing when it reflects an interesting person behind it. So being social in numismatics really matters, despite this hobby having a bit of a fame for being a solitary thing. And I don't mean this in a shallow way, not in the sense of simply being visible, but in the sense of taking part in the shared life of the field, discussing coins with other collectors, exchanging information, sharing discoveries, helping and correcting other people when they make a mistake. Just do it gently, please. It's all much more important in this hobby, and this is how you make a name for yourself. And I'll explain why this adds values to a coin. Because you see, there's this interesting phenomenon in ancient numismatics. Our hobby is one of the most interesting cases of citizen science. There were many instances of discoveries made by numismatists that contributed to our overall knowledge of history. For example, coin evidence has helped scholars work out the ancient Iberian language by comparing indigenous coins and their Latin issues after the arrival of Rome to the peninsula. Coins have also been used to reconstruct the sequence of kings in different regions where the written records are scarce. This is one of those rare hobbies where a serious private collector can do far more than simply own pretty coins. You can seriously push like our joint human knowledge forward, and that knowledge does not stay like trapped inside the academic part of numismatics. It spills outward into like history, archaeology, art history. That to me is one of the most remarkable things about collecting ancient coins. It is like real tangible citizen science. And for those out there who claim all coins should be in museums so they can be studied in the future by an archaeologist and only by archaeologists, let's be real here. Who else is going to spend a lifetime looking carefully at thousands upon thousands of coins, noticing patterns, minute patterns, asking questions, and preserving information, just like these obsessed addicts like myself and you, my fellow coin nerd watching this video? We're not the only kind of people who are crazy enough to do that kind of in-depth look at our coins. So yes, there is value in making a name for yourself. Not necessarily as an academic, but like not as a public figure, but simply as someone others recognize as thoughtful, like a careful, serious, and generous person with their knowledge. And this builds a reputation, and this kind of reputation becomes part of the coin connected to you. It gives your collection context, it gives it personality, and it gives future buyers a reason to fight tooth and nail with their wallets for a piece of your numismatic legacy. So as you can see, and if I could sum it up in a few brief sentences, these 5 tips actually coalesce into 3 habits that you can develop that will benefit you in the entire workflow of collecting ancient coins. They are about buying a coin well. You need to buy coins well, getting as much value per money spent on a coin as a result of you developing an eye for quality. and that comes by learning to be a good numismatist. Then it goes on treating a coin like an experience, enriching each coin and your collection overall with meaning, and communicating this meaning, which has real value, to anyone willing to appreciate it. And finally, it's about yourself, a collector, a numismatist. It's about developing your sensitivity to beauty, collecting well, and in a way being social, empowering the community. Not only because being generous with your knowledge with other people, it's good on itself, which it is, but also because developing a name in this community is possible and it has real tangible value. Okay, so would you actually like to add any other tips to this list? I'll be curious to read it in the comment section below. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, happy collecting, and I'll see you soon. Let me give a special thank you to all of my amazing channel members and Patreons for their generous support. This channel would not be the same without your help. And if you would like to be part of this list, have early access to my videos when they are uploaded to YouTube, and a series of other perks, make sure to check out my Patreon page and my members tab on YouTube. Thank you very much.